This video demonstration is for potato gnocchi. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll talk a little bit about the ingredients we'll be using here. First, I need some potatoes. We have a couple different ways that we can take care of these potatoes. We can pierce them a whole lot with a fork and bake them in the oven. Or what I'm going to do is I actually have some salted water boiling. I'm going to put them skins on into that and allow it to cook until the potatoes are done, and then we'll come back for the next part of the video. But in order for us to actually make the gnocchi, we need some flour, a couple of eggs. We have some butter that's going to be melted, and some Parmesan that will get mixed into that and folded into the rest of the mixture for the gnocchi. Okay, and for the sauce, what we're going to do is cook, sweat out some leeks in a little extra virgin olive oil. We're going to also add some Parmesan and Asiago cheese to that, and some heavy cream. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. Okay, the potatoes are going to take probably about 35 to 50 minutes in order for them to cook all the way through, so that we can peel them, rice them, and continue on with the process. So we're going to go ahead and just throw those straight into our boiling water here. And like I said, I'm going to keep the skins on. And while those go in, we're going to go ahead and start with the sauce. So into my pot, we're going to start with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. And like I said, we're going to sweat some of the leeks. I'm going to reserve some because I'm going to actually cook them and brown them in some butter with the gnocchi a little bit later, before the actual plating and service. So I'm going to take about half of the leeks that I had cut. These were just cut into kind of a small semicircle. Okay, and I just want to let those sweat out, and once we have that sweat out, we're going to add our heavy cream, let the cream come up to a bare simmer, and then we're going to also add our cheeses, and then set the sauce aside for later on and reheat it for service. All right, so the leeks have softened just a little bit, and that's all I wanted to do, is just get the process started. So I'm going to go ahead and add my heavy cream to that as well. And now all I want to do is allow this to come up to a simmer. Once it comes up to a simmer, then we're going to whisk in the cheese. Go ahead and do that a little bit later on in the video. So for now, I'm just going to set it aside and allow for it to just kind of sit until we have the opportunity to make the gnocchi, get them cooked, and be ready with the sauce. So I've checked the potatoes. They're really pretty close to being done, but we need a couple more things for the making of the gnocchi dough itself. I have my butter for the gnocchi right here melting. I just want to melt that through, and then I'm going to add my Parmesan cheese to that, and then those will get mixed into the potatoes along with the flour and egg to create our dough. I have our sauce here, just came up to a nice bare simmer, so I'm going to go ahead and add my cheese to that, whisk it, and again set it aside for later. And that was a mixture of Asiago and Parmesan, and that should be making a nice thick sauce for us. And again, I'm going to just let this sit aside. The cheese will continue to melt inside of that, and we will set that to the back, and then just bring it back up to temperature when we're ready to actually complete the gnocchi. So we'll slide that back there. Our butter, I don't want to brown it, I just want to melt it all the way through. So once the butter is completely melted, I'll add my Parmesan to that, give it a little stir, set it aside because it has to go in warm along with the potatoes. And we're gonna go ahead and extract the potatoes from the boiling water here in a second, and I'll show you what the next part of the process putting the gnocchi together is. So I've extracted the potatoes from the boiling water. They're hot. Okay, this is the tricky part of this whole thing, is that we need to peel these guys while they're still hot. Potato rice, I'm going to go ahead and take my Parmesan and melted butter and add that to it as well. So our dough is done. You can see that it made just a light, really light, fluffy dough here. I don't want to add, again, I don't want to work too much more flour into this. We want these dumplings to be really light and to have a lot of that potato flavor that we're looking for. Okay, so we're gonna just set this aside for about 5 minutes to let it cool, and then I'm gonna go ahead and reset my table so that I can start rolling out the dough, getting it cut, and getting the gnocchi ready to be cooked. Okay, so I had my dough resting. I went ahead and got a little bit of bench flour down on my surface here. What I want to do is just kind of cut each of this into smaller, a little bit more manageable sections. And again, when we're doing these, we don't want to incorporate too much more flour into this mixture. Okay, so now that I have these done, what we're going to do is take each one individually and just lightly roll it. Now that I have all of my gnocchis rolled into our logs or snakes, I'm just going to cut them, and each one of these will be one of the gnocchi. When we go to make the gnocchi, we have two different ways that we can choose to do so. This is a gnocchi board that's made specifically just for making gnocchi. Or if you don't have one of these in your kitchen, you can most certainly use the back of a fork. If you're going to use the fork, just make sure that you get some flour on it so that your gnocchi doesn't stick. And all I'm going to do is take and press my thumb down and then turn. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing on the board here. All we're going to do is press down and roll. Press and roll. Okay, and these are what our gnocchis should look like once we get them ready. I'm going to go ahead and finish out most of this pile here and come back a little bit later. So I finished out my gnocchi. Notice that there's quite a bit of flour on these. I'm going to knock off a lot of the excess before it goes into my water. Have my sauce hot and ready, so I'm just going to move that here in a second to the plating table. I have a pan on because I'm going to take the gnocchi out of the boiling water and brown them in a little butter just to get some texture on them. And I'm also going to throw some of the leeks in that I reserved from earlier. And then we'll move to plating and presenting. So I'm going to just get this guy on about a medium heat. Notice that I have my water salted and boiled. It's at a rolling boil, and I have far more water than I think I need for the gnocchi that I'm doing. Just like when we're doing any other pasta, we want to make sure that we have a larger volume so that as they cook and the starch starts to gelatinize in the pasta itself, that they don't glue and gum themselves together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take and throw some of these in, and the process should go pretty quick. The gnocchi itself does not take much longer than about 2 to 3 minutes to cook, and we're going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, since these gnocchi are really soft, and this is what they should be, I'm just going to put them on to this, and that'll help any of the excess flour come off. Okay, and then I'm going to drop them directly into the boiling water. I'm going to do that with a second batch, and this will be enough. We could most certainly cook all of these almost all the way through, and then shock them in cold water and refresh them later if we wished. Okay, so I have my gnocchi in the water. Right, I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to the pan. That's going to help me get my initial saute done on the gnocchi as they're coming out of the boiling water. We're going to drop in some butter to brown it along with the leeks. But we are really close to having our gnocchis ready. See that the process did not take very long. All of the gnocchi are floating, which is really a pretty good indicator that they're done. I have my pan on, it's getting nice and hot, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer, brown those, add the leeks, and then I'll be ready for my plating and presentation. See that we got some nice caramelization there. Smells really great. Okay. So I have my gnocchi. You can see that they have browned really nicely. It's given it a little bit of extra body. I'm going to go ahead and put some in the bowl here as a portion. And I'm using a slotted spoon, and the reason that I'm doing that is just so that we don't have too much butter swimming around in the bottom of the pan here. Or I'm sorry, in the bottom of our bowl. And I have my sauce that I made earlier. It's still really nice and hot. And that is our finished potato gnocchi with leek cream sauce, Asiago, and Parmesan.